Do you know how to trim a brisket to get perfect slices and incredible burnt ends every time? Well, here's how I do it. All right, so we're starting with our whole packer brisket. This is a 16.5-pound brisket. The first thing I like to do is I find this gray edge right here. I'm gonna just remove it. I don't want to take off a whole bunch of meat. We're just trying to get that part off of it. Now we've got that cleaned off. I'm gonna get this big chunk of fat. Cut that out, get it out of our way. We'll flip the brisket over. We're going to start at the point end, and we'll just work on taking the fat off the top of it. Work our way back, trying to take all the fat off, but as little meat as possible. We're just working our way back till we hit that fat seam where the point stops, and we expose the meat of the flat. Found it at this end here. Just gonna work our way across here. Found it at that end. There we go. So this right here is going to be where our point stops. So we can take this fat, cut it off, get it out of our way. I like to spin the whole thing around. We're going to get in this fat seam and we're going to cut all the way back, separating the flat from the point. And we're going to do that while trying to leave as much of the fat on the flat. Take as much of the fat off of the point as we can. So we're going to get in the seam here. Let's try to get a hold of that. A little cut started and try to get a hold of that point meat. And lift and cut. In that seam, try to stay in the fat seam, but as close as we can to the point. And the fat gets really thin on these smaller briskets, so it can be a little difficult. But we want to use that fat that's on the flat as protection from the heat, because we cook it with the fat side down. And rolling up that point as we go. There we go. Now we have the two muscles separated. You can square this up. Some of this fat. Then we want to try to take this down to about 1/4 inch of fat. And you can take this extra fat and put it in places like that to protect where the fat came off of it. Set those aside, we'll use them later when we actually cook it. Got a little thin there. Probably don't need to take a whole lot more off of that one. Then on this side, we're going to take more of this fat off of the surface. We don't need to leave any fat on this part of the brisket. It's going to be cooking with this side up. I like these 2XL gloves for wearing over my cotton liners, but It's a little bit big on my hands when I'm not wearing the liners. I'm not going to dig into that too much, where you risk the brisket kind of splitting open along that fat seam. Let me cook it. All right, so that'll work for just cleaning up the flat. That's ready to go. Back to our point here. I'm going to take all the fat off of both sides of this, because we want to get rub and bark on both sides. Take out some of this bigger, thicker fat first. And we can come back and do some detailed work. Thin stuff down here at this end is probably just going to burn up anyway, so just find out where it starts to thicken up a little bit. I'll take it off there. Square it up, and by getting that thinner stuff off there, it'll cook more evenly. So it doesn't look too bad. It's the one we originally trimmed the fat off of when we started. So we've got one thickness here, and then we've got a hump right here. So the easiest way to thin that out and to make it even is to just butterfly this open. And your point is much more even in thickness, and you will get burnt ends that are all the same size. So that's it. That's how you trim your point and your flat for a competition style brisket.